Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Brandon Cobb, co-founder of HBG Capital. I've got a special guest with me today, Anthony DellaPelle. He is an attorney specializing in eminent domain, condemnation, redevelopment role, real estate property tax appeals. I mean, this guy's the guy you want on your team if you're going to go and fight the government with your real estate. He's based out of New Jersey. He's a member of the Owners Council of America. He's also the 2024 Global Chair of the Counselors of Real Estate. We're going to be talking about some fun topics today. We're going to be talking about demographics, all these top 10 things that are affecting the real estate market right now. And this guy's got hands-on experience. He's actually doing it. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Brandon, thank you so much. I'm a big fan of your show, and I'm thrilled to be here today and hope I can bring some value to your audience.
Well, we're thrilled to have you because you are going to provide a unique perspective. We've never had an attorney on the show that specializes in what you specialize and has been part of the organizations that you were a part of. We were kind of going back and forth a little bit, seeing, hey, where do we want to take this episode before? And I'm really excited to jump into all these things that are affecting real estate, knocking around some ideas on what could potentially help, how the demographics shifting are going to affect the market. So we got a fun stuff to get into today. But before we do, for those that don't know you, what's your story?
So I've been an attorney for 38 years, and over the years, I did just about everything you can do affecting real estate. I used to do a lot of real estate transactional work. Back in the 1980s and early 90s, I did a lot of land use and zoning or entitlement work, both for government agencies and for developers. But then in the mid 90s, I decided that it was time to change my focus. I used to be at a larger law firm where we had a general practice, and I did all of those things. But I also did what I do now. I did real estate tax appeals, which in my state, very heavily taxed state, obviously. Property taxes are very high for residential and commercial property, so it's a very vibrant area of the practice. And then eminent domain law, which is a little bit different than what people might think, because what most people know about it is the basics, which is the government wants to take your property. If it's a public purpose, you can get what's called just compensation. But in order to figure that out, you really need to understand the ins and outs of the real estate market, of the real estate participants and their behavior. You need to understand how property can be used, reused. And in my state, which is a fully developed state, essentially, there is really very little new development. All development, for the most part, is redevelopment, taking something that was something and turning it into something else. So all those consequences come into play. That's my day job. And been doing it a long time now. I also am involved in several different professional organizations. The one that we're going to talk about today is the Counselors of Real Estate. The Counselors is an organization that has about 1,000 members around the world. You have to be invited to become a member. The criteria are essentially that you have to be respected for what you've done, achieve some level of prominence in your field, whatever it is. And have to have done it for at least 10 years, and you have to get recommendations, and you have to provide case studies of work that you've done where you have solved real estate problems for clients or constituents. And then if you're fortunate, you get an invitation. So we do have about 1,000 members. We are worldwide. We are in 22 countries. We have 27 regional chapters. As an example, my chapter in Northern New Jersey is a pretty large one. We have about 55 members. But there are others that are as small as 5 or 6 members. We just opened up a new chapter in Asia. Most of the members are in Japan, but some of them are in Taiwan, and it's multidisciplinary. So the organization is made up of people from every facet of the real estate industry. More than 60 different professions or disciplines within the real estate industry are represented in our organization. So, I'm a lawyer. I apologize for that. Most people don't like lawyers, but I'm one of the kinds of people that are in our organization. We have real estate appraisers, we have developers, we have asset managers for institutional property owners. We have people involved in finance, both in the traditional lending side and in hard money sectors. We have urban planners, architects, engineers, environmental scientists, you name it. Anything that has to do with real estate, we try to find the top people in each area or region. Hopefully they're invited into membership. And then what it brings us is a cross-section of the real world, that I know that if I need an answer to something on a specific kind of real estate or a problem in real estate, I can go to my members, my co-members and the counselors and get an answer, because that's what we do for each other. We help each other and And it's a really unique opportunity for folks who are in the business, if they're interested, to join. So that's the organization in general. I didn't get to the top 10 yet, but I think I'll pause in case you have any questions about the general stuff that we've just covered.
Yeah, no, very fascinating. This group, it acts like a mastermind group, but something that you don't. The 10 years in a specific specialty with documented case studies. There's a lot of groups out there that's, hey, pay the membership fee and come on in. It sounds like this is something that is very, very well vetted. The Counselors of Real Estate. Their website's www.cre.org if you want to check those out. So a lot of high level individuals that are specialists in their field coming together with all different niches to really brainstorm solutions around certain topics, sharing information and ideas, problem solving. I'm interested. So you say, hey, you'd reached out and said, hey, look, there's this amazing report that we've done. We've put this together. We've got these, I think it's like there's 10 items on here. I want to bring like an 11th big factors that are affecting real estate. So I want to kind of bring some of these into the present and maybe talk about the future. The one that wasn't on here in this report that you and I were kind of combating back and forth talking about was this concept of demographics. Lots of very big shifts are happening right now, right? And as you know, the consumers drive the economy, and that shift is happening, right? Leadership drives the economy. You mentioned millennials. They're now of the age where they're starting to make decisions. The baby boomers are retiring. They're kind of getting out of the way. And so you've got this very large shift in psychology and how to run things. And so, as somebody, I'm not in the corporate world as much. I've been a small business owner ever since I was 26 years old. I've worked in corporate for about 4 years, but didn't have the bird's eye view to really see how decision making. I wasn't mature enough, or I didn't get the opportunity to see how the demographics decision making was different. But you've seen it. You've been in the field for a long time. What has been the biggest shifts, in your opinion, around how leadership is going to run and how these businesses are going to run now that the baby boomers are retiring and the millennials are stepping up?
Let's just talk about those two portions of our population, at least in this country. Mine, the baby boomers, we've kind of been in charge for a while now, right? I'm one of the younger baby boomers. I'm going to be 62 very soon. But we are running things, not just in real estate, but in other places too. We are elected leaders in different government jobs and political worlds, both in this country and outside of it. So a lot of the big decision making has been done by people of my generation. In the past several years, we have started to see a very significant shift towards the millennial generation, which is the largest segment of our population in this country. It's, I think, 75 million or so. So if 75 million people want to do something in a country with 300 million people, chances are their influence is going to be felt, right? That is something as simple as where they live, right? We know that there was a massive migration from the urban cores, both before the pandemic and during, towards the Sunbelt states, right?
Mm-hmm.
Away from the cities, into the suburbs, into the rural areas. Those decisions affect everything because those people who are moving because they feel that that's a better place to live for whatever the reasons. It might be that there's a job that took them there, or like in the case of my own family, it could be nothing to do with the job. The job could still be where they moved from, but now they can work it remotely because of the advancements in technology and in societal norms, right? So the influence that the millennials will have and already are starting to have is significant. It goes into the decisions as to risk. It goes into one of the things in our top 10 list, which we're going to get to, which is sustainability in real estate, right? The millennial generation cares a lot more about that as a whole than we do. I'm not saying it's not good or it's good or bad. I'm just saying they care more about it. It's going to influence decisions and investments and how to build, how to rebuild, how to design things. Where do you put your money? What do you invest in? Whether it's a stock portfolio or a real estate portfolio, are they building resilient real estate? It affects energy, how it's used, consumed, right? Whether we're getting away from oil, petroleum products or not. Those things are going to change more as younger people are making those decisions because it matters to them more. But overall, I think if you recognize that because of technology and advancements in transportation, the world is getting smaller. We are all more reliant upon each other for things than we used to be. And
Mm.
something as simple as a real estate investment, let's say you owned an apartment building in the 1960s or 70s. I am fairly certain that if you had partners, they were around you geographically. It was very
Yeah.
rare to have partners, whether they be equity partners or debt partners, that weren't local. Now it's rare to not have someone involved in a deal that is from some other part of the country or world or
Mm.
different place in the way they think about things. So their um, policies, wherever they are, the way they think, the way they do things, are all more related to each other. And I think it's going to affect our decisions. It's going to affect the real estate industry. It's already started to show.
What are some of the biggest nuances, do you think, between the decision making of the millennials and the baby boomers? For example, I'm a millennial, so I'm 34 years old, going to be 35 here pretty soon. I know that my generation tends to be more impact focused. So we kind of popularize the like, oh, the brands that donate $1 for every teddy bear that you purchase, goes to providing water to Africa, right? This whole impact concept, environment for sure, right? Like they are making conscious environmental decisions to use products that are better suited for the environment. Electrical cars. Those are just a few that I know. Freedom has been a big thing. I want to say that my generation, the millennials, were the ones that popularized the hey, the average employee stays at a job for about 2 years before they
Right,
move
right,
on. Like I
right.
remember when that wasn't a thing. Like when I was younger in college, there was a very big shift going on where it was like, oh gosh, these corporations, the pension is like a thing of the past. Used to, you would go, like my grandfather worked for the same company pretty much his entire life. And he had
That's
a
the way it
pension,
was.
he took care of him. And then the corporations started doing away with that corporation. When you kind of got away from this handshake deal, like I feel like at some point that changed. Like I remember my dad saying that, yeah, Brandon, I used to be able to shake somebody's hand and do a deal with them. And like that's how business was done. And having being like a man of your word was an actual thing. It was like a part of the American culture. And that is 100% kind of gone out the window. So these are a couple that come to mind for me. What are you seeing?
A lot of the same. I believe that a lot of those core principles and how people do business with each other are the same as they used to be, but the way in which we communicate those ideals and beliefs is different. Something as simple as what you just said about people changing jobs more often, which is true, it happens. Um, that affects the real estate market. It affects it in several ways. Number one, what if you are someone who is working in an office environment? That's your job, whatever it is. Okay, you work in an office. First of all, you may not work there 5 days a week like you used to. You may only work there 2 or 3 days a week. You may have a hybrid work policy. And I know those things are shifting around all the time. And some of the big companies are saying everyone has to be back in the office 5 days a week again. But the point is, there's more flexible concepts in how to do your work, especially if you're in an office. Hospitals are kind of still the same, right? There's still people there
Yeah.
doing their jobs, even though machines have taken over a lot of those roles. It's not as significant as the office worker. But hasn't that shift in office work patterns and habits changed the real estate office market? It's one of the things that's on the top 10 list, right? You have more vacancy because you don't need as many people because they're not there as much. You have more co-working arrangements. Companies like WeWork, which have had trouble, obviously, but the concepts are still there because it makes sense to have a flexible environment where one day you might need 2,500 square feet, another day you might triple your company in size because you got a big investor. And now, how do you do that when you were locked into a 10-year traditional office lease? No, you don't do it. You do a flex lease, right? And you do it that way. So I think that the way in which people think and do things and act and behave and communicate shapes the real estate industry and how it reacts to things, bearing in mind that the real estate industry is a reactive industry, which
Mm-hmm.
involves more long-term decision making than other businesses do. So there has to be a way that these two things match up and there's some equilibrium. I think that the people that are going to have the best chances of succeeding in their real estate businesses in the future are the ones who can understand these changes can predict what impacts they may have on hard assets like real estate assets, and can plan for them in how they develop them or redevelop them or use them. So something like an office building that was built in my area, I live in the northern New Jersey area, so we're really New York City suburbs here. In the 1970s and 80s, we were building Class A office buildings like they were going out of style. Why? Because corporations were moving out of the urban core into the suburbs where people lived. So you got all these beautiful office buildings. Now those office buildings might have 30 or 40% vacancy, right? Because there are not many people working there because they may not be in New Jersey anymore. They might have moved to South Carolina or Tennessee, where you are, right? Or they may not need as many people in the office, so the buildings are vacant. What are they doing? Well, in my area, they're knocking them down. Perfectly good Class A office buildings are getting knocked down to build apartments or to build warehouses, right? And now the neighbors don't want warehouses in their backyard, so they're objecting. And then the zoning changes, and all these things are so connected, Brandon, that it's really hard to take any one of them and look at it independently without considering how it might blend into the others. And that's, we made this list, this top 10 list. It's about our 12th or 13th year doing it as an organization. It's created by a committee, which is about a dozen of our members, which is intentionally diverse from a geographic standpoint, from a professional discipline standpoint, from an age standpoint. We want diverse viewpoints. They come up with the things that they think matter every year as a committee. They then send it out to the membership at large, get our viewpoint in a survey. We give information back to them, and then they compile the list and rank the top 10. It has some some issues that have overlapped from year to year. You see them keep coming back, but there's other new ones that come up. And this year, I think that the two big things that you will see as we go through them are the interrelationship between how we have ended the era of free money that started in the great financial crisis and what influence global unrest and elections around the world may have on real estate. Those are the two big animals, the two big elephants, I think, that together filter into almost every one of these top 10 issues.
Interesting. I want to talk about some of those top 10. We're definitely going to need some more time because I want to get to these. The other big demographic that I want to jump into is the baby boomers, right? You're a baby boomer. They are becoming retired, right? And there is,
Right.
I mean, the shifts in society that are happening with this are yet unforeseen. I mean, this is going to be I want to call it a black swan event because I do think there's repercussions from this that we haven't seen yet. It's not getting a lot of news. This is the biggest private equity transfer of wealth in history. All these baby boomers have these really solid businesses that their kids just don't want to take over for whatever reason, or it hasn't been sexy to go into, and they're just giving these businesses up or just selling them. I mean, there's never been a better time to be able to grab these businesses with a customer base that they've had for 20, 30 years and scoop them up. That's one opportunity that I'm seeing in real time is the private equity space. The other is this shift in demographics. We're getting older and older. And I forget where I saw this or what statistic it is, but I want to say that like 20 to 25% of the population is going to be over the age of 65 here in the next like 10 years. That's up from like 11%, 12%. That is incredible. And the big thing that people aren't talking about with this shift is sure it's a larger shift in the consumer base. So you've got 1 out of 5 people that are making a big portion of consumer spending because the way somebody who's retired spends much differently than somebody who is, early millennial like myself. But the biggest is the wealth. Probably 90%, I'd say maybe 80% of the wealth is concentrated in that retired population. 80%, it's 80-20. I think Parkinson's law. 80% of the wealth is going to be concentrated in 20% of the population. And that's going to drive the investment decisions 100%. 80% of the wealth is going to be making those investment decisions. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the environment changes. What do you think are going to be some of the consequences or some of the impact of this huge demographic shift into the baby boomers retiring?
Well, up until a few years ago, I would have told you that I would have expected that as my generation ages, the baby boomer generation, that there would have been a profound transformation in the residential real estate market, because once you are an empty nester, if you've had a family, you're fortunate to have a family and now they're gone, they've gone on their places of their own. You don't need that big house anymore, so you sell it, right? And now you're living longer because we're getting better at medicine and taking care of ourselves, right? So there's more people getting older all at the same time. And those folks, hopefully, if they've been doing things the right way, have money to spend in their retirement. They're not just going to live on Social Security, whether it be in a 401k or they have investments or whatever it is. They've got money. They want to put it into something that's different than they used to use their money for when they were paying for college tuitions and medical bills for their kids and all these other things. Now, up until a few years ago, it was likely they would sell that big house. It would then become available to the next generation to buy, right? Because where you raise your family, hopefully you made a conscious decision to go into a nice, safe community where it's great to have families, to raise families. The schools are good. There's access to good health care. There's access to culture and all these things, open spaces, all the things that you want when you're raising a family. We don't need that anymore as old folks, right?
Yeah.
But now what happened? If we still have a mortgage, our mortgage is almost guaranteed to be under 4%. It might be under 3%, right? Are you going to sell your house and then take on another mortgage and pay more for a smaller house? It doesn't make sense, does it? So I think the baby boomers are going to be more likely to hold on to the real estate that they had, which makes it more difficult for the entry level buyer to come in on a single family residential opportunity. And therefore, there's going to be more demand for those homes than there was because there's not as much supply. That alone is a massive shift that I believe the last 15 years has changed from what we thought it would be, because people are more likely to hold on to their homes for longer periods of time than they were because of the change in the interest rate environment. And that will affect all these decisions that folks that are in the businesses like yours make, right? Where do I build? What do I build? Is it built to rent? Is it built to sell? Who is my consumer? How many of them are there? What am I competing against, right? And now you've got, as I said, the two biggest segments of the population, at least as far as numbers, and I think power, are mine, the baby boomers, and the millennial generation. You guys are coming up in the world and already have, good for you. I mean, you've earned it, right? But bumping up against us. And we used to exit more quickly. We used to die more quickly. We used to move on to rental apartments. We used to move on to getting out of the suburbs and going into the city more quickly. Now we're not. So we're going to collide more. And I think that those likelihoods will have impacts on the real estate industry in ways that are just starting to be felt. I moved into my home, my current home. It was not my first home, but it was 24 years ago, and we were the young ones. Okay, there were maybe a couple of families that were moving out. The homes were built right around the early 90s in my community, so we were there almost 10 years later. Some of the folks left. Since then, there haven't been as many who've left. There's a lot more aging in place in these homes, 4-bedroom homes, 5-bedroom homes in a lovely subdivision in a nice area, 25 miles from Manhattan. People are hanging on to it. So where do people like you, right, in your 30s, that might be have a family, you might be starting a family, where are you going to move? Where are you going to live? What are your choices, right? Are you going to go somewhere like my own child has done, which is 2,000 miles away from her job, just because she can live there and have a good quality of life? Or are you going to stay where you are and pay more, get less, and still have all the headaches of commuting in a big urban environment? I don't know, but I do think that these are the kinds of things that you have to be aware of and thinking about.
Yeah, very interesting on the demographics. Time will tell here, but we're already starting to see the battleship move, like you said, and things kind of collide. I want to get to some of these 10 top influential factors on the real estate market. The first is global and U.S. elections. So perfect timing here right now. It is October 29th as of today when we're filming. Global and U.S. elections. Talk to us about that. How is that going to have an impact on the real estate market?
So we obviously have a really big election in a week. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not just the presidential election, it's Congress. and there are local elections that will trail and follow all these decisions that are people making when they're going to the voting booths. Um, just that alone is very, very significant because of the implications that it may have here in this country for very simple real estate based decisions, right? What if the new governance brings in more aggressive rent control mechanisms? How does that affect
Mhm.
things? Just as an example, right? Rent control has historically been a local issue, and some cities have it, others don't. There's some discussion that it may be something that is going to be attempted on a broader scale. It will have broader implications if it happens. And I'm not here to tell you it's good or bad. I'm just telling you that will affect things.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, you've already
the
seen it affect things. Money has been moving in swaths from these high controlled states like New York, California. COVID just revealed what we all knew was there. Business friendly states, highly
Right.
regulated
Yes, sir.
or unregulated versus unfriendly business states, highly regulated. And you can see there's been hundreds of billions of dollars moving in between those cities because of those laws that are in place. So
And they're
we've
just
seen,
one thing. That's just
yeah.
one thing, right? I mean, what about the 1031 like-kind exchange mechanism? If that is changed, I don't know if it'll be eliminated, but if it's changed, won't that affect behavior of real estate market participants who have historically relied upon it as a way to create wealth, to succeed, to advance their own interests, to defer the tax on things, and it's there for a reason. It's there to spur
Mhm.
economic activity and growth, right? So again, whether it's good or bad is not for me. I'm not here to make policy or suggest it. I'm here to tell you that those types of things can change as a result of this election, not just because we're going to have a new president regardless of who wins, because we know that Biden isn't running anymore, right? But because the houses of Congress that make the laws is likely that those both houses are likely to have some level of change in how they do things. And law requires legislators to write it and people in the executive branch sign it into law. Either or both of those things can change, which can change the laws that are made, and those laws are likely to affect us in the real estate decisions that we make. But it goes beyond that. It goes beyond the pure real estate consequences of any election. It has to do with the policies that may be put into place as far as monetary policy, as far as economic growth, trade, immigration. All these things will end up having an effect on real estate. And we
Yeah.
don't yet know who's going to be there, what their policies are going to be, and whether they will be successful or not in their policies. Because a
Mhm.
lot of people make promises during elections that aren't kept, and maybe they wanted them to be kept, but they couldn't get the law through, right? Because
Yeah.
they reached a roadblock in Congress or in their local state legislature that they didn't get it through, even though they had really good intentions. They couldn't make it law, so it didn't happen. But if you have trade policies put into effect with us and other countries, won't that affect real estate? Can it
Mm.
affect certainly at least the industrial real estate market, right?
Yeah. Big time.
And those kinds of things are out there. They are prevalent already. I think they're going to continue to be more prevalent because we're all, as I said earlier, we're all connected much closer than we used to be in this world in a lot of different ways. So the consequences of the election here and in other countries, I think there's 70 other countries that have significant elections in 2024. Most of them are over already. So we're starting to
Mm.
see some of the folks who were elected and what they're doing. There are going to be more of those changes going forward next year.
Yeah, and for those out there that don't pay, that's another thing about the millennials. We don't watch the news. Our news sources are not on the TV anymore. They're on our social media apps. And I had turned a blind eye to politics pretty much my entire life. And it wasn't until this last regime did what they did, and I could very clearly connect the dots between their policies and what happened with inflation and interest rates and everything. I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to start paying attention. This makes sense because I hear a lot of people go, it doesn't matter who gets elected, everything's going to stay the change. Well, it affects certain sectors. You might get away for a couple of elections. Eventually it is going to affect you, and we got affected by it because nobody saw rates doing what they did. So if you were in real estate, it was impossible not to be affected in some way, shape, or form, or by varying degrees of that. So very real stuff. Okay, so number one is global and U.S. elections. Number two on this list of factors that are the top 10 factors that affect real estate or are going to affect real estate is the cost of financing. I think this one's pretty obvious, but talk to us about that one.
Yeah, so I don't know what inning we're in. The baseball season is almost over. Unfortunately, I'm a Yankee fan, and the season may be over tonight. But as far as looking at the real estate market and the industry as a whole in baseball terms, whether we're in the second inning or seventh inning, we know the game isn't over. We know that financing has changed, that it is not likely to go back to the way it was over the course of the 14 or 15 years after the great financial crisis started. That was a manufactured set of results. That was the result of policies that were put into place to
Yep.
try to help us get through a very difficult economic time. And now it's over. And now we're at the point where we know that debt will cost us more than it did several years ago. It's still not really high. It's just by recent terms high. And the markets have to adapt to that because of the fact that the people who are borrowing money in the real estate business are not just borrowing it for permanent financing. They're borrowing it for construction loans. They're borrowing it for mezzanine debt. They're borrowing it for whatever they need to borrow it for. And it affects the prices because of that. The expenses are higher. So either you, the consumer, get charged more for rent or to buy a piece of property, or the owner makes less. And if the owner makes less, they may not do it. They may not pencil out. So how much will it change? I don't know. I'm not that smart, but I know that we're not going back to a place where you could borrow for 3.5%, 4%. It's not going to be that way. And now you factor that into your decision making. There are less transactions because of it. The lenders are a little bit more judicious, is maybe the right word, in how they lend. So it's tougher to get financing than it used to be. There are less people in the market lending money than there used to be, which makes it tougher. So I think you're going to have to scrutinize your decisions on how you tailor your real estate investments with that in mind, knowing that at least for the foreseeable future, it's likely we're going to be in a similar interest rate environment that we are now. And whether the Fed comes out and drops things another half point or not, I know that can have a big effect on people. It's not going to go from 7 back to 3.5. It's not going to happen. It can't. Only if there's a black swan event like we had in the great financial crisis.
COVID.
Right. So it's out there. Be mindful of it. Know that this is the new norm for the next couple of years at minimum, regardless of how other policies might give you incentives to do certain things. But it's going to cost you more than it did, and you have to make sure that you can buy at a price which will accommodate that kind of debt structure in order to succeed. Otherwise, you're going to hand the keys back.
Yeah, the biggest trend that I saw is since the 70s, late 70s, we've been on a downward trend with interest rates, right? The bond market has been in a bull market, 40 years, something like that. And this historic interest rate, it broke that trend. I mean, it straight up demolished it. And so we don't know what the new trend is going to be, but history shows us that if it goes down for a little while, it tends to go up. And so a lot of people are making the argument that the economy is going to be significantly different because you've had a 40-year decline on how much money costs to borrow, and it's been going down, 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 where it almost hit zero for a little bit. In some foreign countries, it did hit it went negative, right? That's how desperate they were to get money into the system. You could borrow money and pay less of it back than what you borrow. That's insane to me. So that's going to be a different financial landscape for businesses and corporations when they borrow money, especially if it's in an uptrend here. So I'm very interested to see how that's going to play out as well. So
Yeah.
number two is cost of financing. Number three is loan maturities and debt repricing. Talk to us about that.
It's really the same issue, and that is the fact that people who carried
Yeah.
loans are seeing them mature. Commercial real estate loans generally have terms of 5 to 10 years. So when were they cast? If they have 5 to 10 years, right? If they're coming due now, they were cast in a lower interest rate environment. So we know that to recast them, to refinance those debts, their cost of the debt is going to increase significantly. It may double, it may be higher than that. It really depends upon what the terms were. But we believe that there is anywhere between $1.5 and $2 trillion of commercial loan debt that will come due before the end of 2026, so next 2 years. A lot of the loans have been extended. I
Mm-hmm.
think that the market participants were kind of hedging their best to see if they could carry it for another year or two, wait and see, watch what happens, see if there's a different interest rate environment at that
Yeah.
point in time. But that doesn't solve the problem. I think ultimately these loans will be repurposed um, into new loans, and the new loan structure is going to be a lot more expensive. So, um, does that mean that you'll be able to pick up real estate from a lender who didn't want it back but had to take it back because the equity participants lost their investment because they can't now refinance 6 years
Mm-hmm.
later, right? That's already happened. It's happening more, right? You read about office buildings and urban cores. I just read one, $330 million office building in New York City sold for less than $10 million. What's
Mm-hmm.
up with that? I mean, someone got a great deal, right? And maybe it's not worth 330 anymore, but it's also not worth 10. But the bank or whoever had it, they let it go for that. So, those are the kinds of things that we're watching out for that already started to happen. There is absolutely no way that this will not have a significant impact on asset pricing. And it's going to just vary from class of real estate to class of real estate because the extent of the debt wall is probably different from class to class, right? If you have an apartment building that was that had permanent financing put into place at 4.5 or 4.75%, and now it's 6.75%. Sure, that's going to hurt you, but you may not lose your equity in it. Whereas if you had an office building with the same numbers, you are going to lose it because you don't have any tenants left,
Yeah.
right? And so your income can't support that higher debt structure. Whereas with the apartments, maybe it can. Maybe you can raise the rents a little bit. Maybe you can put a little bit of money in, get a more attractive value add opportunity to get more gross income and more net income, and you can survive that and then rebuild it into the future. So um, the ability to delay those maturities can't continue forever. There will be impacts. How they're resolved, I think, is going to be up to those market participants, both on the borrowing and lending sides, to figure out if there are solutions that can carry us forward into the next cycle of the debt that's going to be cast on those properties.
Yeah, we're already seeing it. I think there was $2 trillion of debt that was supposed to come due in late 2023, and we're getting to late 2024 now. I mean, I've got my money in some of these multifamily syndications, and I know they're not doing good. And they've had to get the sponsors have had to get extensions on it. Some of them are making, personal loans to buy down and get like a rate cap. There's been a bloodbath. I know there's been a lot of unfortunate personal bankruptcies because of these loan maturities and the debt repricing. And like you said, you're not going to see those 3-4% rates anymore. Those I think are gone. They're a thing of the past. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. There's been some phenomenal buying opportunities too. I've seen as
Right.
well in the distress that's been created for all this, especially in the developer world. Like, like we've built a lot of houses, and I can tell you when we were building in 2022, holy schmoly, inflation was real. I mean, it was very, very real. And so a lot of those developers were over budget, and they're not able to sell their assets. They're having to, the loans are coming due, and like they need to just get out of them, and you're getting a pretty good deal on stuff like that. And so I'm seeing a lot of opportunity in the development space for developers who've built these apartments and built these large buildings that are over budget because of the logistics, the issues, and the inflation. And so that's really interesting with the loan maturities and the debt repricing. What about number 4, the geopolitics and the regional wars? How is that going to affect real estate?
Well, we've already talked about the impact of elections, and this is related
Mhm.
to that. But if you think about two aspects of it a little differently, it might come to light. One is if there is uncertainty overseas about their economies, the people in those countries who have the financial means tend to look for safe havens for their investments. The United States is looked upon as a safe haven, usually, almost all the time. So I think you probably, as you see more unrest in other countries, you probably see more inflow of capital and capital investment in this country because people believe that we have the best chance of getting through it because we're a capitalist country, right? And so you probably have already seen it. I remember in the 80s, the economy in Japan was gangbusters. They needed places to put their money. They put it here, and then they lost a lot of it, and their economy went in the tank. Here, it's not just Japan and the United States; it's every country and the United States, and you might see more investment here because of that. The other thing is that the policies that the other countries adopt and advance, if they're at war, are things that are going to have a bigger impact upon us, because there may be trade embargoes put into place, there may be tariffs put into place, there may be other consequences of wars that are in other countries that affect us here. And that's why I get that people of your generation don't watch the news the way that the older generation did. I still know people that read the newspaper from cover to cover every day. It's part of their livelihood. I don't do that, right? I don't get printed newspapers anymore, but I still look at the news sometimes, probably more than you do. I think you got to be mindful of what's going on, just because it's going to have an impact here, right? On something. It might be your real estate. It might be how much your gas costs. It might be how much you pay for your iPhone, right? Because those things are things that are done in other countries that we consume here. So keep an eye on those. We haven't had a period probably in decades where there hasn't been a significant period of strife in some other country around the world. I don't think they're all going to just, be happy and hug each other and be peaceful going forward. I think there's going to be more of it, unfortunately. And we have to understand that those things are going to have impacts on us.
Yeah, the news definitely drives decision making. People make decisions all the time with their emotions, not rationale. And so headlines do influence positions and where people put their money. I mean, you can see it in real time. We're emotional creatures at the heart of it, and that's going
We
to
are.
be how we make decisions, unfortunately. What about number 5 and number 6, insurance costs and housing affordability? By the way, yeah, I did an episode with her name is Beth, and she was like, this has been absolutely bonkers for insurance. You've got hurricanes, you had fires in the Midwest, you had tornadoes in the Southeast. It was this perfect storm for insurance, and as a result, rates have gone through the roof, and it's created a big issue. Talk to us about insurance and then the housing affordability and attainability.
This obviously affects everybody, because if you have real estate, you have insurance on it.
Yeah.
And no one's has gone down. And insurance companies are not going to write an insurance policy where they think they're going to lose money. So if they've had to pay out claims, which they have, because of all the natural disasters that we've had, the rates are going up. They already have gone up significantly. It's going to continue to go up. The industry has to figure out solutions to make insurance more affordable for people, because if it doesn't, I think the consequences are going to be more severe. So I've heard of some creative approaches, self-insurance, where you own a bunch of assets, pooling of different kinds of policies, stacking policies with higher umbrellas, different deductibles and things like that. And I think that the insurance industry is looking for those solutions, because they know that if they offer a creative solution that can help people make it more affordable, everyone's going to buy their insurance. Right? But we're not there yet, because we're still dealing with the impact internally for the underwriters and the actuaries in those companies to say, if we charge this for a premium, we'll make this much money because we'll sell this many policies, right? That's how they do that, right? Well, you get life insurance, right? It costs a lot more to insure someone like me who's in his early 60s than someone who's you in your 30s, because the risk is higher for me because I'm older, right? And there are people that do that for a living, that figure out how much they should charge me so they can still make money if I die, right? And hazard insurance is the same way. I have a home in Southeast Florida. In 1 year, the hazard insurance went up 70%, the premium, 1 year. And we weren't even hit. We were fine. It's just that they had to pay all these claims for other people that it went up. And then everyone except for 2 insurance carriers left the market. There were only 2 left. Eventually, others will come into the market. And maybe the government will step in and provide some tools, which is one of its jobs, to help the private sector where it needs help, right? That's what the government's supposed to do, not hurt us, but help us. To offer some sort of programs or incentives to partner with the private insurance industry to figure out ways to make insurance affordable. Because if they don't, we're going to continue to see that side of the ledger go up in expense, along with the debt costs, along with the property tax costs. And now none of your real estate is going to be affordable. So we do have to watch it. It affects not only the hazard side of the insurance equation, but the casualty side. If people are filing lawsuits because they hire lawyers and they recover big verdicts and the insurance company's paying those things, that increases the cost and the risk too, right? All those things need to work themselves through the market. We've had an unusually high number of extreme weather events in the past 10 years or 20 years that have shifted the way in which the insurance companies are thinking, but they haven't yet, I believe, come up with how they believe they can be competitive other than just making you and me pay for it through the nose. There have to be
Yeah.
other ways. And I hope that they get to it soon because I think it's going to really start to, if it hasn't already, affect decision-making on buying and selling real estate.
Oh yeah, especially the NOI, the net operating income based assets like, multifamily and commercial. I mean, that insurance cost is a huge portion of it, and it is ruining the underwriting for some deals. It is making some deals not pencil just because of the change in the insurance cost. It's a very real thing.
Just that, right?
Yeah.
Just that, right?
Yeah.
So, and then the other one that's related to this that you mentioned, which was number 6 on our top 10, is housing affordability. The cost of insurance is just one component of that, right? The
Mhm.
cost of the debt is another component of that. What about something else that I'll talk about later? If your rateable base in a community shifts because those commercial real estate properties like office parks, office buildings, don't any longer contribute as much to property tax base so that the budget in the town can't be hit. So your property taxes go up more because you still have a house there, but they don't have millions of dollars in revenue from the corporate office community, the corporate real estate community, because they're not there anymore. They left. They knocked those buildings down, right? You still have to pay the police. You got to pay the mayor. You got to pay the teachers in the schools, right? You got to pay to plow the roads and to clean them and to build the sewers and the
Yeah.
water utility. All that stuff is still there, Brandon. And I don't know how people can afford higher bills for their homes unless the cost of the home goes down, which it hasn't happened yet, right? And I don't know that it will or won't. It's a supply and demand thing.
Mhm.
But you're seeing housing prices, I think, still go up in many places. At worst, they seem to have stabilized for sale
Mhm.
prices. They haven't really gone down anywhere that I'm aware of. Maybe there's some pockets here and there. Um, but I know that in a community in an area like mine, which is very common next to big cities, to get into a home, it's very difficult to do that. And we're not talking about a big home, just a starter home for under $500,000 or $600,000. Okay.
Yeah.
That is in the big city communities, in the beltway areas around them, that's what it costs. So what do you need now to do that? Well, you need at least 20% down because the lender's not going to give you a 95% loan anymore, right? Or a 90% loan. They want at least 20% down because they have more risk. The cost of your debt is higher. The cost of your insurance is higher. The cost of your property taxes have gone up. And how do you buy a house? You probably can't unless you got lucky in the stock market or in some business deal, or you have a relative who was kind enough to leave you some money. Otherwise, you can't buy a home. So how do we keep this thing going? Part of the American dream is to own your home, right?
Yeah.
And maybe not as many people will do that. Maybe they'll be renters for the rest of their lives, like more and more people in Europe are, where they never own homes. Maybe that's the way we're going. And I don't know that we're ready to say that yet in this country, because I think that owning property is still one of those things that people really value about being an American. And owning the property where you live, that you raise your family in, is such an important part of being an American that we have to figure out a way to make housing more affordable. Every state will do it a little differently. In my state, the courts actually force the towns to allow more affordable housing to come in. And then there are programs available to provide different types of financing incentives to
Yeah.
attract the private sector in. I think that you have to see more of that. I think that the government has to come up with more ways to bridge the gap so that people can buy homes and own homes, knowing that the landscape is different today than it was 10 years ago, knowing that that people might be fortunate to have really good jobs that still can't afford to buy a house. So I hope that there are creative solutions. I think we need them. I think that if we get away from the principle of owning your own home, it will change a lot about our country. And I'm not crazy about that. I think it'd be much better to have people want to own a home to care
Yeah.
for it, to care for their community the way that we all did, at least in my generation. And I hope that if the private sector can't make it work by itself, that there will be government incentives that are meaningful around the country.
Yeah, 100%. It's a problem. We've kind of been living in la world with these artificially low rates for so long, and everyone is getting the shock factor. I think after 2.5 years this spring, I am predicting a just ravaged spring. I think it's going to be huge because a lot of these people who've been sitting on the sidelines for the last 2.5 years who couldn't find a home before rates went up, who were making, going on 20 tours, writing 4 or 5 offers over asking price and couldn't get anything. There was buyer's fatigue. They literally got sick and tired of trying to buy a home and they just threw in the towel and they said, we'll just wait for an opportunity. Well, then their opportunity was rates went up, right? The cost doubled almost. So they've been sitting on the sidelines. And now that it seems like we're in a downward trend with interest rates, they've actually gone up half a point here recently, which was surprising.
Saw that.
No one really expected that. We'll see what the next Fed meeting does. If they do end up lowering, it'll probably bring it back down. But we seem to be in this at least steady period where they're no longer raising rates. Things are becoming a little bit more normal, and so it's providing an opportunity for these fatigued buyers to jump in next spring. So that's what I'm seeing, feeling at least here in the Nashville, Tennessee market.
But what are they going to buy? I mean, we have a 4 to 5 million unit shortfall of housing, according to the government statistics, right?
Mhm.
Who's building new affordable housing for low and moderate income folks, right? Where is that? I don't see a lot of it in my state. We have these what we call inclusionary projects, which are 80%
Yeah.
market rate, 20% affordable, and that helps, right? It does help.
Mhm.
It makes a dent in it. But if there's 5 million units short for housing, and you have institutions that have already essentially taken over the build to rent market by buying up and building swaths of single family homes that are for rent, not for sale, will never be for sale, probably in my
Yeah.
lifetime, maybe not yours. That means that there's no supply. So the new supply has to be geared towards affordability because the luxury market is still strong and healthy, right? The upper middle level and high level income folks, they can afford it. They can buy the $2 million home because they have it, because they were fortunate
Yeah.
enough to make it. But that $400,000 home, the $300,000 home in the Midwest, or in my community, a $500,000 home, that home will not even hit the market, and it'll have competing offers above list. So if I want to be in that market, I'm not finding anything. There needs to be more supply, and there need to be ways that are beyond what we're doing today to create it so that people who want to buy can, because that's what's not
Yeah.
happening.
Well, and I'm going to be a little biased just because I'm in my market and that's what we do, right? We're going out and we're creating and getting the, land entitlement, your background, getting things rezoned, getting the civil drawings approved, and we're developing and selling this land to these national home builders, and that's what they're doing. They're building these 1,400 to 2,000 square foot cookie cutter homes that are uh 300 to $390,000. And that, I mean, it's that $2,500 per month mortgage, right? It's kind of like what they're
Right.
aiming for, 2,000, 2,500. That's what people seem to afford. That's what millennials seem to afford. So we see a lot of it. And I mean, the opportunity is endless. They cannot buy enough of it quick enough. I mean, they're literally our phones blow up. What you got? What you got? What you got? So we see a huge opportunity here to be on the same side as Wall Street that is cutting checks to us. We were building a lot of these homes, and we just decided that there's a bigger opportunity here through pre-sold contracts with the land for entry-level first-time homebuyer housing communities. If you can convert the farm into the development to get it pre-sold to these Wall Street backed firms, DR Horton, Lennar, Smith Douglas Homes, LGI Homes, right? All of these publicly traded building companies. The sky is like the limit. It's a huge opportunity, and it won't last forever, right? But yes, that's everybody seems to want affordability right now. What about artificial intelligence and sustainability? That's the seventh and eighth. AI was not on the scene 2 years ago. Oh. I mean, it's hard not
Yeah.
to have a conversation now around AI. How is that influencing the real estate space? I recently had a guest on who was using AI in the apartment space to automate getting their tenants into the homes, automating tenant maintenance through AI. I mean, this was really, really cool. It eliminated, I think, like they could completely eliminate one of the property management employees just based on how AI was able to reroute them like to the correct contractor. So instead of they would like call in, and instead of it go directly to the person that was in charge of maintenance, that would then have to call the correct contractor, it would just like automatically route them to the correct contractor. I mean, really, really cool technology. It was one of those few moments where I was like, oh my gosh, like that is a really cool disruptive AI thing that was going on. So I was really blown away by how that specific piece of technology was making an impact as far as AI. What are you seeing?
Well, I was going to ask you for the answer because I think that people in your age demographic can understand it a lot better than I can. But this is what I know about it. First of all, it's here and it's being used in other businesses and industries quite effectively.
Mhm.
I also know that it's not without fault, and that the quality of the product or the results that you get using artificial intelligence depends in large part on the quality information you put in. And that's
Mhm.
where I think we are, at least in the real estate industry. We see it coming out and being used quite effectively in valuation related determinations. So the data relating to a sale or a lease of property or expenses for that property, that can easily be manufactured by an artificial intelligence system in a way that might be faster and more efficient than having a human being do it. Um,
Mhm.
I think about this actually in the context of my own career, because when I started practicing law, we didn't have computers. I have a new assistant who just started with me last week, and I was telling her what it was like to file a legal brief in court for a case that was 40, 50 pages long. You didn't even have a word processor, right? How did you do
Huh.
that? You had to type it, right? So what did it mean? It meant that you spent a lot more time thinking about what it was that you wanted to say instead of just banging something out and changing it around 35 times because you could on a computer. You didn't have a computer. So your thought process in the way you use the tools that you had to take that into account. And I think that AI is the same now. We know that real estate is a data heavy business. It
Uh,
relies a lot on data from a variety of sources. The cost of goods and product and services, right? The cost of debt. What kind of rate of return can you get? How does increasing rent or anticipating higher or lower vacancies affect your NOI? All those things are things that artificial intelligence systems can probably crank out answers to faster than even the smartest, individual. And that's why we use computers, right? That's why we do it. So does this give us an opportunity that we're just starting to see the beginning stages of in our industry? I think so. I don't know how it's going to affect us in years to come, other than that it's going to be more prevalent. And I believe that the people who harness it, who understand it and how to use it, are going to be the ones that succeed, not only in their own investments, but in their businesses and how they help others, because they're going to be more and more in demand because they can turn something around more quickly. But conversely, if you hold yourself out as being someone who can help someone with, problem solving because you know how to use AI, and then you give them back something and it's worth nothing, it's wrong, then obviously you're not going to be in good shape. But you can see how it's impacted stock market trading, bond market trading already. We are an industry that lags real time because we have to collect the market information. And then people like real estate appraisers and underwriters look at that and decide how it affects future decisions, right? So getting that information in place where it's all good and reliable and accurate is the first part. Otherwise, what you get out is going to be garbage, right? Because you put garbage in. You have to have quality in. And it's going to affect things like energy, right? Data centers require a tremendous amount of energy. We don't have enough of them now, right? So you're seeing warehouses turn into data centers. You're seeing office buildings knocked down, turn into data centers because we need to have this massive computing power. And that will affect things as well. I just think that this is early on in its life cycle in the real estate business, that you should know it's there. You should know people who know how to use it better than you. You should talk to them about how they can help you and then make informed decisions on whether or not it makes sense, or whether or not you want to try it on your own, knowing that there's going to be trial and error. And maybe it's one of those things in 2 or 3 years, the use of it has surpassed by leaps and bounds, its efficacy that we anticipate. I think that's what's going to happen, but I don't know today because it's at such an early stage for our industry.
Yeah, it's disruptive. We're seeing it I mentioned the property management space, being able to just reroute directly to the contractors. I'm seeing it in a information, what they're doing. This is really interesting. I learned this at a little mastermind meetup I was at a couple months ago. They're taking books like Tony Robbins' book, and they're uploading all of it into like a Tony Robbins AI, and then people can ask it questions and it'll spit out answers. That to me is fascinating. And so you can do that for anything. You can create your own little AI robots that will do this. One of the cool things that I saw here recently that they're using AI for is you could take like a conversation like we're having right now, transcribe it, and then have it create a little ebook out of our conversation and what we had. So you're able to create these value add uh, ideas, these value add pieces of information to push out to people. And so you're going to see a lot of great information just readily available, and then it becomes an attention game, like who's able to get the attention. That
Right.
was really really interesting. I saw I use we do a lot of onboarding through our Loom app, and I've seen people use Loom and again, when they're training somebody on how to use something, send it off, transcribe it, and create a standard operating procedure on it. And that was really fascinating the way that they've done it. So this is some really really cool stuff that they've got.
I agree.
Um,
Oh, sustainability, you asked, because that's the next one. And I think it's related to all these other things. It affects how we use real estate, how we develop it and build it, rebuild it, repurpose it, what our energy sources are, how they get implemented. We have tried to account for resilience in the way we design real estate, and especially in areas that are subject to extreme weather events. So, and I know that there are infrastructure projects around the country that have been going on for years, actually. It's nothing new. They were building levees in the Mississippi River Delta, 100 years ago, right? Because there were flood events there, and they moved people out of those homes because they were built too close to the river. Well, today, just as an example, I have an infrastructure resilience project around New York City and our side in New Jersey of the Hudson River, where they're building flood walls that are going to like have a gate that will close when a extreme event comes. But lo and behold, it's not being built on a piece of vacant land. It's next to some very, very valuable high-rise, buildings. So the consequences of that are pretty interesting and significant to watch. But one of the things they did in a city called Hoboken, which is across the Hudson River from Manhattan, they built a park that is surrounded by lovely residential multifamily communities, high-rise and mid-rise. The park looks like a park, but beneath it, it's a parking structure, subterranean, that when it rains, it collects stormwater, right?
huh.
So it serves two purposes. And they didn't just build the parking deck above ground like they might have 10 years ago. They built it below ground so it could hold the water when the rain comes because there's nowhere else for it to go. Those kinds of decisions will affect real estate around the country. They already are. I know they're affecting investment decisions by people both in the stock market and in the real estate markets. And there are developers and funds and syndicators who talk about, how green they are and sustainable their developments are. Those are affecting decisions by people as to where they want to live, work, invest, rent, all those things. And we're going to continue to do that as we go along, whether it be for weather purposes or for more energy resilience and recycling. We look to other countries as to examples that they've set, particularly in Europe, because they're a little ahead of us on those things, in the way that they have dealt with sustainability, because they were fully developed in a lot of Europe 100 years ago, right? Now I'm fully developed in New Jersey, but they got a 100-year start on me. They know how to build below sea level in Holland. They know how to do that, right? We have New Orleans, which has had its own problems because it's below sea level. But go to Amsterdam and see how they do it, right? And maybe we borrow some of their ideas. So sustainability is here. It's here to stay. It's going to influence more and more decisions as we go forward. And I think that anyone who was going to undertake a significant real estate investment knew just buy it or repurpose it. If you don't have that on your checklist of things to think about and deal with, I think you're making a mistake, because what's going to happen if you don't have a resilient piece of real estate? There could be a tornado or a hurricane or a flood, and it's going to cost you money, and you might have to pay more for your insurance, right? All these things are woven together, and it's something that has to be on everyone's minds.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Everything's moving towards the more sustainable business model. You're seeing it. Number 9, office vacancies, tax base, urban cores. We kind of talked about that one a little bit, about the vacancies downtown, what's going on with the tax base, and just this migration away from the urban cores. What about number
Yeah.
10, the price expectations gap? How's that going to
Um,
affect things?
a year ago, it was massive.
Yeah,
The owners and sellers still thought they had the best market ever, right? And then the buyers knew. And there were very few deals because of that. The deal flow dropped
yeah,
precipitously. If you went and asked a broker, hey, give me the last 10 deals you worked on, and you did that 3 years ago, they could rattle them off in 2 seconds, right? And then in 2023, there was very little to speak of, because
yeah.
the sellers still thought they had something worth more than the buyers. That gap was different from sector to sector. It was probably largest in the office sector and smallest in the industrial sector, probably. It's existed in the multifamily sector. I think there was a lag there. I think that the multifamily operators were saying, hey, I've got these tenants, they're paying rent, it's in a great city, there's good jobs here, all that stuff. What they didn't account for is the fact that when they bought it and they had a loan that was going to come due in 2025 or 26, the cost of the debt was going to negate half or more of their NOI, right? So what does it do to the pricing of that asset? So
Mm-hmm.
each sector had its own gap. The gap seems to be diminished and diminishing going forward, because I think of two things. Number one, the sellers are recognizing that if they don't take what they can get now, it may get worse. And secondly, the buyers recognizing opportunities more than just having fear, right? That they say, hey, I can get this asset for pennies on the dollar. And why shouldn't I? Because ultimately, real estate is almost always about the three cardinal rules, which are location, location, location. If you have a good property in a good location, chances are you can make it work, right? How much you pay for it is obviously part of that equation. You can't overpay, because you have a great property, a great location, but if it costs you too much money, you're still going to lose. Once the price comes down, that gap narrows. Now all of a sudden, maybe you go in and you buy that strong asset at the right price. So I do think that while there are still both buyers and sellers that are holding firm on their positions, there are less of them.
Yeah.
And the wave of maturities that's coming in all sectors and that has already started will affect that as it goes forward. I think the gap will continue to decrease. I don't know when we reach equilibrium. I don't know if we'll ever have equilibrium again in the real estate market, just
Yeah.
because of the way all these things are connected and how much uncertainty and risk there is. But for now, it seems as if you watch where the money's going into great deals for great properties, and it's happening. And a year ago, it probably wasn't. So that
Mm-hmm.
means that the signs are positive. I think the trends are improving, and hopefully people who weren't in the market that want to get into it will start to see opportunities that make sense for them, whether it be for their own home to buy or for an investment property.
Andy, this has just been a great episode. This has been mind expanding. This is real concrete stuff that people can actually use in their decision making to make more informed investment decisions. This has been wonderful. If people want to learn more about you, follow you, where should they go?
Well, one thing to look at is our website's right up on the screen, cre.org. If you go there, there's actually a tab for the top 10, and we have not only the material that I've discussed for you in little summaries, but there are articles linked to it. So if you want a resource, you want someone who's the person on AI, they wrote the article, you're going to see it on our website. It's free. You can look at it, you can read it, you can contact the author, get answers. That's what we're there to do and help people with. And I commend anyone who has any interest in any of these things to use that library, electronic library, which is available to the public at no cost as a resource. That's why we do it. I'm just holding this office here. I think it's it's less than 70 days now left in my term, and I'm excited to have been at the helm of the organization this year. I'm going to go back to my day job in January and just be a lawyer and try to figure out how much real estate is worth in litigation proceedings, which is what I do. But I'm always happy to think through things with folks. Even though I'm only in New Jersey, I'm part of this organization, another organization with national exposure and network. So I do believe that if anyone has a problem with anything having to do with any real estate asset, I'm happy to talk to them and get them in the right place, in the right hands, because it's such a vast industry with so many different angles that the most important thing you can do is be more informed than the next person, than the person that you're trying to make a deal with, right? The more you know, the better off you are. You can consistently learn about things, and I think we can help you do that. So the easiest way to get a hold of me is probably just to use this address because it's already up there. If you just send an email to info@cre.org, it'll get to me. Okay.
Cool. We'll make sure that
It'll
that
get to
gets
me.
posted.
Yeah.
Thank
Or
you
you
for
can
coming on the show
search up my
today.
name on the internet. You'll find me in my day job too, but that's the easiest way.
All right. We'll make sure that gets posted in the show notes. Anthony, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Brandon. I really enjoyed it. Enjoy the rest of the day.